Okay, perfect. So now you've got all of your footage placed on the timeline and you've got a very, very rough structure of how you think your piece should look. I'm just going to show you 3 basic effects that you can kind of add to your footage before we come into the animations and eventually add all of the overlays and transitions that are really going to change the overall look of how things look anyway. But this is some of the sort of base work that's happening underneath that, and these are just 3 nice easy effects that are good to sort of know and have in your back pocket to use to manipulate footage a little bit. So the first one, we're just going to play around with the blending modes and layer in a couple of images. So for example, I've got here, I've got a clip of this eye which leads into this clip
This billionaire
here. At the moment it's just a hard cut, so it goes from one to the next. But what I'm going to do and have a little play around with is see how it would look if I was to overlay one of the images on top of the other slightly. Now you can do this by adding a cross dissolve, so you can kind of fade from one to the next. It's quite easy. So I've just done there by clicking in the middle and Control D, and that just fades between the 2, but it's quite basic cut still. What I want to try is overlaying them a little bit and seeing if we can have like a bit of a glitchy kind of effect. So we're going to extend this clip out a little bit and have it overlay underneath here. I'll change the colors on the clip so it makes it a little bit easier. So our top clip is now green, bottom is now blue. So let's have a look at what happens if we change the blending mode on this one. So at the moment the blending mode is in the effect controls and it is set to normal. Now if I was to change it to screen, we can kind of see an outline here of the underlying image underneath. See? So it's a bit of an effect kind of going on there. We can also play around with other ones. You can do things like overlay that will affect different parts. So generally speaking, on the blend mode options, these ones will get rid of the darks in the image between here. These ones will get rid of the brights. So for example, if I was to add that, so it's getting rid of the brights, making the overall thing kind of darker. These ones get rid of the darks, make it lighter. These ones here, down here, play around with the color. So for example, I can get rid of the hue or the sort of saturation, so they make it quite odd. Perfect. So I'm going to set it to screen and I'm going to add a couple of cuts in as well, so it kind of cuts in. So we're going to make a cut here, a cut here, a cut here, a cut here. I'm going to delete a few of these cuts. So now it's going to kind of glitch in and we want it to come back to normal here. So perfect. And that's a really, really basic kind of cut that's happening underneath there, and it's just a slight effect playing out. So when we have more things layered on top of this, that'll be a good little glitch kind of effect. And we could take this one step further and we could, if we wanted to, make a mask and mask just inside the eye so that the glitch is only happening subtly inside the eye. So there you go, that's taking it one step further. Now the glitch is only happening inside the eye with that basic little mask. So all I've done there is gone to the opacity, selected the center ellipse tool, made a circular mask around the eye, and then expanded the feather, which is where the image is going to fade out on, and then I brought the expansion actually in to help me fit it better inside the eye. Cool. And I think what's really going to help sell this last little bit is to zoom in. We're going to put these together. We're going to call this eye, and we're going to actually zoom in from this point here. So I've created a point here on the video. Let's create another point, but we're going to zoom right in to the eye. Let's just see how that's starting to look. So that's one little effect there that's playing around with the sort of blending modes and the scale of the image, so zooming in and out, rearranging the size of them. You can do this in all sort of shapes and sizes, so feel free to play around with that and affect the blending modes. And then another effect that I want to touch on is a speed ramp as well. So we're going to affect the speed of how we're seeing an image. So I'm going to do it with this Space Invaders clip here. So at the moment it's playing the game and it's slowly moving across, but I want to speed that up a little bit. So you could click R and use that to drag in and out, left to right, to change the speed. So for example, if I'm on the stretch tool, if I drag it to the left, it's going to speed it up because it's shortening the clip. There you go, look, it's going to make it, that's now 176%. It's faster, and it's going to make that overall clip faster. So you can see it moving faster there. If I was to drag it out the other way, it's going to make it shorter. That's now at 40%. And you can see that it's moving slower. That's one way of doing it. There's another way. We can do Command R, and you can set the exact amount you want. So you could set, say, I want it double the speed. You could say you want half the speed, You could say to reverse the speed so that it plays in reverse. So at the moment, there are extreme ways of changing the speed and they're always constant. So it's always going to be, say, 200%, and you can't play around with that. What we want to do is affect it so that it goes slow into fast, kind of like on an iPhone when you set the in and out points and then it speed ramps up or speed ramps down into slow motion. We're going to essentially do that here. Now to do that, we double click the clip and go to time, show clip keyframes, time remapping, and we're going to get it to show speed. So now this line, instead of normally the opacity as default, is what's being shown. So if I was to drag this bar up and down, the opacity would change. Now, where I drag this line is going to affect the speed. So if I just drag it up, it's going to now increase the speed. If I drag it down, it's going to now slow it down. But what we want to do to get that sort of speed ramp effect is we're going to add a point. So we do that by clicking pen, and that's P. Or if you need to select it on here, it's this tool here. It's the pen tool, and we're going to add a point to there. We're going to drag out these 2 points. So what that's done is it's created a side either side, and now where that point is, if I drag this up, it's only going to affect the right hand side. So if I drag this up, I can see the percentage is increasing by, it's going to be going all the way up to about 400% there. So it's going to go along this line at 100% until it hits this point, and then it's going to speed up to 400%. Now it's going to do that quite sharp at the moment. You can see how steep that gradient is. If I want to play around with that, I click one of the points and I can drag either side of this to really kind of level out that curve. You see that? So I can make it really straight, really fast, or I can kind of curve it out a little bit so that it's a little bit smoother. And then if I drag these out, I can make this longer. So that you see this getting longer. So I can elongate the amount of time it takes to go from 100 to 400%. So let's just see roughly how this is looking if I was to drag this right out. So it's going to go from normal speed to really fast.
But he promised his mum he'd return to Japan, so he went home and started.
There you go. And I like that, but I think we can go even faster. So we're going to drag it a bit more and we're going to make it really fast. So it goes to like 1000% maybe. Let's see. Yeah. And then elongate this a little bit more because that's obviously going to be quite drastic now to go between 1 to 1000. See how that looks.
Promised his mum he'd return to Japan, so he went.
You can do that on lots of different clips. Obviously with something that has a lot of motion, it's going to work a lot better. You'll see this example in a lot of sports where they'll like slow it down, speed it up. But that's essentially how they're playing around with the speed on that. It's just using these speed ramps in and out to play around with the overall look on that. Cool, and then I'm going to show one last little effect that I've done here, which is just getting a little bit creative with the music. So I've seen that in the music here, there's a bunch of beats. And what I have here is one normal clip that I've just zoomed in and out of to the beat. So it's going to like jump around a little bit and be a little bit glitchy to the beat of the music. So if I just play that out. Cool, and that is quite a basic one, but it's just a fun little way of adding a little bit more sort of dynamic movement. So that's a few really easy and basic adjustments to be able to make to your footage where as you're starting to sort of layer it up. So you don't just have that base layer of basic clips, you've got some actual edits going on and some things happening, and then from here that's going to get much more complex as we go through and add the transitions and the overlays as well to really sort of tie it all together and look like a lot is going on. At the moment they look quite basic, but these little effects are going to help throughout and they're really good to sort of implement in your workflow. So see you in the next video.